Hey, and welcome to Witchcrafty. With Borderlands 3 being released on the 13th of September, I couldn't resist making a Claptrap plushie. How I started the project was basically just me looking at many reference pictures of Claptrap and just thinking, am I really doing this in a week? Yeah, but I did it before it was released. Woo! So there are a lot of things that you need for this project. I'm just going to put this picture here for about 10 seconds so you can gather everything and just to make the video a bit less long. So just give it a quick pause here if you need to. The first thing you'll need is the pattern. This one is 3 pages and is a little more complicated than my standard patterns, but it is available for free for my DeviantArt. I've left a link down below in the description. I'd recommend you don't cut it out all at once and only do it with each step, as it can be confusing what piece goes with what despite the labels. The first thing you will need is to cut out all of the pieces on the first page. The colours and how many you need are written on the pattern for clarity. Trace all of the shapes onto the coloured material and remember to leave seam allowance where necessary. Cut out all of the pieces marked F in their allocated colours. The piece F5 is meant to be white, I just couldn't fit the text in on the pattern. Everything you're about to attach should be on the side with no tracings as we want it to be visible later on. When doing any of the sides, try your best to fit my placement or use a reference image of Claptrap to assist you, and use matching thread and small neat stitches. Make sure you're not placing any of these on the outside of the tracing, so pin things in place and use a light to see through to make sure that you're not doing this. First, join the stripe on, using the piece F13 as a reference as the strip should fit just below this. The first thing I did for the front was I joined F11 and F10 onto the shape F7. Then I centred and joined F3 onto F2. After that's done, join it onto the centre of F9. Join F6 and F4 together, and you don't have to, but I also went over F6 with a few small black stitches to imitate the vent look. Once I'd done that, I made one little mistake, and it's the only one that I actually recorded in this video, but I recommend instead of joining the pieces onto F1 first, join F1 and F7 onto the side piece, and then join F9 and F4 on. We're then just going to add on the finishing touches by sewing on F13 to the sides of F1 and sewing F12 onto the top left corner and F8 at the bottom right corner of F1. F5 was actually a bit of an afterthought, but I thought it gave Claptrap a bit more character, so I sewed it onto F3 at the end. And that's the front completed. We then just need to move on to the sides, so take 2 side pieces and 2 white strips. Before joining on the white strip, make sure it's aligned as best as you can with the front piece by lining them up side by side. You can then sew them on. You then need to trace and cut out all of the side pieces which are marked S. The first piece you need to sew on is S1 and S2. Then, on top of S1, sew on S3. You then need to attach S6, S7 and S8 just above S2. You can pretty much do these in any order that you want as they're just meant to represent tangled cables. I did mine in the order yellow, red, blue, and I tried to make them identical on each side. After that, you're just going to cover up the top with S4. Layered on top of the centre of S4, you will need to sew on S5. And that's the sides completed. Take the last strip and last side piece and, like beforehand, make sure they are all lined up and sew on the strip. Cut out and trace all of the pieces. This one is a bit more straightforward, but you just need to join B1 and B2 so that B2 lines up with the end of B1 with a small gap in between. Sew B4 onto the lower side of B2. Just above B4, sew on B5. And finally, on top of B5, sew on B3 so that it's just covering the top corner of B2 and the corner of B5. Now we can finally move on to the top, so trace and cut out all of the pieces marked T. The first thing you need to make sure is that the pieces line up to the sides. T1 should align to the pieces F1 and B1, and the pieces T3 should align with the side pieces S1. Once it's all aligned, sew on T1 and T3. You can then sew on the small details. T4 and T5 should be at the top and the bottom of T1. And finally, the last piece, T2, should be sewn more towards the back. I'll use small black stitches along this to replicate the vent look on the top as well. Now that you have all of the body pieces joined, put them all so that the tracing is on the outside and sew them all together. Make sure they are in the right order when doing this. When you have nearly reached the end of the stitch of the bottom, flip it back to the right way up and stuff it generously with polyfill. You can then tuck in and conceal the raw edges with an invisible stitch. Cut out and trace all of the pieces for the arms. The first thing you will need to do is to sew an A4 and A3 onto two of the A2 pieces on the side with no tracing. Then, once that has been done, you can place the A2 pieces with the tracing on the outside and sew along the line. Once you have nearly reached the end, stuff it lightly and conceal with an invisible stitch, creating two arm covers. These should be placed at the top of the shape S3. Then, taking the shape A1, fold them so that their tracing meets to create a tube shape and sew along the line. You then can flip it inside out, tuck in the raw edges and conceal them with an invisible stitch. Before joining these pieces onto the body, take the shapes A5 and align it with another A5 and sew it together. You should now have 4 claw shapes. Sew 2 together near the shorter side in a straight line and then join them onto the end of A1 with an invisible stitch. Repeat this with the second arm. The arms need to be joined in the centre of the shape S5 with an invisible stitch. Lastly, we can finally move on to the wheel, so trace out and cut out all of the pieces. The first thing you'll need to do is to join two W2 to the centre of the two W1 shapes on the side with no tracing. Then space out 6 shapes of W4 evenly on W3 and join them to the side with no tracing. You then need to place all of the tracing on the outside and join one of the W1 shapes to the W3. The best way to do this is to sew the ends of W3 together and then join the first one to W1. Not the way that I did it in the video. After that, join on the last W1. When you are very close to the end of the stitch, flip it the right way up and stuff it with polyfill. You can then close off the stitch. Lastly, you just need to join on the wheel into the centre of the bottom. There you have it! You have successfully created a Claptrap plushie. I'm sorry that I had to get a bit more technical in this video as there are a lot of parts, so if you got lost at any point just let me know and I'll try my best to clarify for you in the comments. Please leave a like and subscribe and comment down below on ideas that you'd like to see me make next. And while you're at it, why don't you go check out my other videos? I make new videos every single week. Happy vault hunting everybody and thanks for watching. Bye!